Good evening. Welcome to Fantastic Dimensions. This video is a bit of a request. We're talking on one of the various Facebook groups about RPGs today. And we were discussing horror games and what you can do to improve your GMing of a horror game, or I guess to kind of give your horror game more atmosphere, more fear in particular. So I thought I would make this video and just give you a few tips on things that I have done, things that have worked for me as a GM, and if I think of anything, I might even throw in some experiences I've had as a player. I've been told that I run pretty decent horror games, and it's kind of funny to me because I can't think of what I do, that makes them good. I don't know if I'm just lucky I have good players, but there's a few things anyway that I think of when I think of GMing a horror game. And you can see I've set that up nice and dark here, and I'm talking in this low voice, partially because my wife and daughter are sleeping about 20 or 30 feet away from me right now. But atmosphere. One of the best atmospheres I've ever run a horror game in. It was a Call of Cthulhu game, and it was a live game. In fact, probably the only live Call of Cthulhu game I've ever run, I think. I was back in Ohio visiting, and I was fortunate enough to have a live game with my friends back in Ohio. So we all got around a table, and we had all these little tea light candles, and we lit candles up everywhere and turned off all the lights in the place. So we played by candlelight. And, it was a little bit tricky to read the character sheets and to read the dice rolls, but we just had to keep, a bunch of candles kind of in certain areas on the table so that we could use that light when necessary. And as you probably know already, when you're running a game you know very well, with players who know their characters, you don't need to look at the character sheet that much anyway. One of the advantages to the live game, obviously, is the shared environment, what I've just discussed. Another advantage is little things you can do as a GM to kind of make your players nervous. Not the characters, but the players. Things like banging on a table when a gunshot goes off. So it jolts the table, the dice rattle, and everybody gets startled for a moment, Standing up while the players are sitting down, walking around the room as you describe something, or using your gestures as you impersonate a particularly nervous NPC, or maybe just a crazy NPC. These are extreme advantages of playing in a live environment, which is something, unfortunately, that I don't get to do very much here in Ireland. But if you can do these in your live games, I think, believe me, it will help. By standing up and walking around while your players are sitting down. And make sure if they try to stand up, say, excuse me, do you mind sitting down? Just, sit down and think about your character. Because you're standing and they're sitting, and this, I think, automatically makes people a little bit nervous, puts them on edge somewhat. They feel maybe off guard. Anything you can do like that to affect your players' mood is going to help the game, I think, and it's going to help the way their characters interact with your horror environment. It's going to help to really drive that suspense, that fear, that mystery home to them. So that's point 2, the mystery, the suspense. This is very much cliche. I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't already know if you're thinking about running a horror game, but don't tell the players everything. In fact, tell them nothing. Tell them very little except for what you have to, what they need to know, and what they should know. Don't reveal your big bads or your monsters or anything until the climax, if you can avoid it. The less they know about it, the more there is for them to worry about, for them to fear, and it creates doubt and this is a very powerful tool when running a horror game. Fear of the unknown, right? That's what they say, that's the cliche. So, yeah, don't let them know. I ran a 3-part Call of Cthulhu investigation on my channel, actually, and I think it was in the very first part, the very first part, there was a monster revealed. This monster attacks, in fact, maybe attacks a couple of times. So the players right away are like, okay, well, if that's our monster, okay, we got to figure out what this thing's all about and what we can do to stop it, etc., if we can stop it. But later on, as you get further into the investigation, you find out that the monster is just a tool. It's being manipulated and being used by the real villain of the story, the real monster, which is something far more unexpected and far more terrifying, I think, and far more unstoppable, as well as my players, I think, found out. But I won't spoil too much more beyond that. But what else can you do to really run a good horror game? I think something that I do anyway, and I don't know if this would work for everyone, but have a lot of downtime, a lot of quiet moments in your game. You know, you want to give the players time to think, let their imaginations run wild, let them talk amongst themselves a lot, have them talk to NPCs a lot as well, and you know, get into your NPCs and, you know, get those interactions going, because you can do lots of things to drop weird hints or even red herrings or anything else, and red herrings are great to use too, where they think they're onto something and then it turns out to be the wrong thing or a dead end. You know, all these kind of distractions and you know, diversions that throws them off the path, and then when they realize, oh no, you know, we've been looking at the wrong thing all this time, and then wham, you hit them with something startling, something disturbing, maybe something frightening, just real quick, like, and you know, it brings them back to the horror, and they say, oh man, we've been doing the wrong thing, and you know, this has just happened. Maybe it's almost cost us their lives, or maybe it did cost someone their lives. Maybe a particularly important or well-liked NPC has disappeared or died or something. Little things like that that can just, you know, wake them up, bring them back to the fact that, oh yes, this isn't just an investigation game, this is also a horror game. That's another point I would make. And, you know, with my reputation, which I think is somewhat unfair, but in horror games, absolutely, you do not pull any punches. When characters are fighting against anything, especially against a monster, but even if they're fighting other people, I nearly killed a player character just with a couple of other NPCs in a bar. They got in a bar fight, and he got stabbed pretty badly. Lost a lot of blood. Nearly killed him. And people, after that fight, the entire party was on edge. They're like, holy shit, you know, that guy almost got killed in a bar fight. What's going to happen when we run into a monster? Don't pull your punches, and don't be afraid to kill your players' characters. You know, watch a horror movie. How many horror movies do you see, good horror movies now, where nobody dies? Oftentimes somebody dies that you least expect, or somebody that you think is an important character, or somebody that you really care about. And who do your players care about more than their characters and their friends? I'm not saying you should set out to kill everybody, but I'm just saying, don't flub your dice, don't pull your punches, because part of that fear comes from the fact that you're dealing with something that's out of your league, or something at the very least that can take you out if it catches you unawares. What else can I say? These are the things that come to my mind anyway in the games that I've run. Also, and this comes more from my experience as a player, but I suppose I've done it as a GM as well, use shocking things, you know. A real horror game, in my opinion, a good horror game, cannot be PG. I don't even think it can be PG-13 unless you're really prudish about your language and such. But a real horror game, I think, is going to be gory. It's going to be vulgar. It's going to have horrible language. Because what happens if you walked around the corner right now and all of a sudden some horrible night terror comes out of the shadows and tears some hobo apart right in front of you? Are you going to say, "Oh my, I better get out of here"? No, you're going to say, "Holy fucking shit," and you're going to run. So make your horror games R-rated. I think they should be, because real life is R-rated. And what's more terrifying than real life terror? Don't be afraid to draw on those kind of experiences too, and use lots of description and ambience in your environments. Try to make it feel as real as you can to your players, so they feel more like they are their characters. Think about when you play a horror video game and how you can really get drawn into a horror video game because you have this, especially, now think about the difference between a console video game and a computer video game. With a console game, you can have your wireless controller and you can sit on your couch 20 feet away from your television set and play your game. And you might get a little bit startled because you get immersed in that character. But when you're sitting down at a keyboard, in an old-fashioned anyway, keyboard, PC game, your face is inches away from the monitor, probably maybe a foot away from the monitor. You're right in there, you're in the moment. So draw your players in with your descriptions, with your scenes. Make it real, make it disturbing. And then they're like putty in your hands. And when you hit them with a bang, they really feel it. And don't overdo it on those bangs either. They should be quick, sudden, shocking. And then you have to have that downtime so you can build the tension back up before hitting with something else again. If you overdo it, it just becomes an action movie, right? And an action movie, let's face it, is nowhere near as scary as a good, suspenseful thriller horror. That's all I have for right now. I would like to get some video responses on this. If you run horror games or if you play horror games, even if you don't run them, give me a quick response. Tell me what you do that works for you, or what other GMs have done that works for you. Tell me about an experience you had in a game that really drove home the horror. Any of these things. I'd like to see as many video responses as possible on this. I'll probably tag a few people on Facebook and try and coerce them to respond. In the meantime, this is Ian signing out from Fantastic Dimensions, and I look forward to seeing you at the gaming table.